As important as Easter Sunday is, just as important is what happens after Easter. And the gospel tells us several of these stories of the days and weeks that followed the day of resurrection. This Sunday and next, we'll be spending 2 Sundays on chapter 21 in the Gospel of John, as John records what happened after Easter. Let's pray together. Bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts, that together they might be pleasing and acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So what do you do in the week after? The week after a wedding? The week after a funeral? The week after a graduation? The week after retirement? What do you do in the week after some major life-changing event? What do you do in the week after the resurrection? W.H. Auden has written a wonderful poem entitled "For the Time Being." It's actually written for the days following Christmas, but I think it's really appropriate for the days following Easter. Well, so that's that. Once again, as in previous years, we have seen the actual vision and failed to do more than entertain it as an agreeable possibility. Once again, we have sent him away, begging, though, to remain his disobedient children, the promising child who cannot keep his word for long. But for the time being, here we all are, back in the moderate Aristotelian city of Darning and the 815, where Euclid's geometry and Newton's mechanics would account for our experience, and the kitchen table exists because I scrub it. To those who have seen the vision, however dimly, however incredulously, the time being is, in a sense, the most trying time of all. But in the meantime, there are bills to be paid, machines to keep in repair, irregular verbs to learn, the time being to be redeemed from insignificance. The happy morning is over. The time is noon. For the time being, Peter says, I'm going fishing. And the other disciples say, we'll come too. Back to their nets, back to their boats, back to their daily routine, back to their normal lives. You see, fishing was their business. And fishing is our business. Their work was fishing. This was not a pastime. This was their livelihood. This was their job. But in a spiritual sense, fishing was also their calling, because Jesus had told them they would be fishers of men and women. So back to their business, and back to our business too, because we are called to be about the business of casting nets for Christ, drawing others into the fellowship of Christ, fishing for people with the good news of the cross and the resurrection. Any of you who are in business or organizations are familiar with the name James Collins. Collins has written some of the most important books on organizational management in this century. Collins' 2 books, Good to Great, Built to Last, have become classics. One of the principles that Collins raises up for any organization: preserve the core, stimulate progress. Preserve the core, stimulate progress. He says the core ideology, the basic values and beliefs must be preserved for any organization, but they must be willing to change and grow to fulfill the mission. Let me quote from Collins. He says, if an organization is to meet the challenges of a changing world, it must be prepared to change everything about itself except its basic beliefs. The only sacred cow in an organization should be its basic philosophy of doing business. Now, as United Methodists, we know what our core purpose is. We say our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We are in the fishing business. And regardless of changes in style or program or ministries or even ministers, we need to be about the business of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. In 1975, my first appointment here in this conference was over in Macomb County, and one of our great friends was the pastor of the Methodist Church in Mount Clemens, Stan and Ann Bailey. Stan and Ann were wonderful to Judy and me, great encouragers, and we were blessed by their lives. Stan told a story once of visiting a heavy-duty grease factory. He said the visitors were ushered into a large room. The tour guide gave them a detailed history of this grease factory, 37 years in business, 500 employees, producing the best machine lubricants in all the world. The guide told them they were going to be going through the factory and that it was quite noisy, and so they wouldn't be able to talk, so to save their questions until they all got back at the end of the tour, and so they did. And they went into the factory, and he was right. It was a busy, noisy place with machines buzzing and wheels whirling and pumps pumping and incredible energy going on in the production of this world-class lubricant. When they got back to the lobby, the tour guide asked if there were any questions. And one person in the group said, "Yeah, I have a question. Of everything that we saw, I didn't see a shipping department. Where's the shipping department?" And the tour guide said, "Oh, well, we don't have a shipping department. You see, it takes all the lubricant we produce just to keep the machinery running." And Stan concluded, "Friends, our United Methodist Church is the best lubricated grease factory in the world. What's missing is the shipping department. The church does not exist for itself. It exists to bring others into a commitment to Jesus Christ. Our business is not just to grease the machinery, to keep all the committees running, to keep the wheels turning. Our business is to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Our business is not maintaining a wonderful facility or designing beautiful worship services or offering great fellowship just for our members. Our business is fishing. And if all of our ministries and all of our programs, all of our facilities, all of our fellowship doesn't enable us to reach people with the gospel of Jesus Christ, we're not doing our job." Now, I realize the United Methodist Book of Discipline is not popular reading. It's probably not on your bedside stand. But there are places where the Book of Discipline can be downright inspiring. Listen to this paragraph about the mission of the church. "The heart of Christian ministry is Christ's ministry of outreaching love. The forms of this ministry are diverse in locale, in interest, in accent, yet always Catholic in spirit and outreach. Beyond the diverse forms of ministry is this ultimate concern, that all persons will be brought into a saving relationship with God through Jesus Christ. The people of God, who are the church made visible in the world, must convince the world of the reality of the gospel or leave it unconvinced. There can be no evasion, no delegation of this responsibility. The church is either faithful as a witnessing and serving community, or it loses its vitality and its impact on an unbelieving world. Our core purpose Our ultimate concern is that others would be brought into the fellowship of Jesus Christ. We are in the fishing business. And if we're not making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, we're not doing our job. Like Peter and the disciples, fishing is our business. Collins says, preserve the core, that core mission. Then the second part of his equation is stimulate progress. Or to say it in a more biblical way, our business is fishing, but maybe we need to fish out of the other side of the boat. To quote Collins again, he says, we found that companies get into trouble by confusing core ideology with specific practices. A visionary company carefully preserves and protects its core ideology, yet all specific manifestations must be open for change. It is absolutely essential to not confuse core ideology with culture, strategy, tactics, operations, policies, or other non-core practices. In fact, the only thing that should not change over time is the core ideology. Now, the disciples knew what their work was. They were in the fishing business. And so they went back to the same old lake, back to the same old boats, back to the same old nets, back to the same old techniques. And frankly, you kind of want to scratch your head and say, how could they do that? I mean, after experiencing the resurrection, after encountering the risen Christ, after the events of this incredible week, you have to wonder how they thought they could go back to the same old life and do the same old things as if nothing had changed. And yet, maybe we understand it all too well. After all, Auden says, there are bills to be paid, machines to be kept in repair, irregular verbs to learn, and the kitchen table exists because I scrub it. So for the time being, we go back to fishing, the same old routine, same old nets, same old boats, and we get the same old results. But then along comes Jesus. And Jesus says, hey, what about this? How about fishing out of the right side of the boat? Now, the gospel doesn't record it, but I just know there had to be a moment of stunned silence. The right side of the boat? You got to be kidding. I mean, we've always fished out of the left side of the boat. I mean, in this community, the only way to fish is out of the left side of it, never the right side of the boat. Oh my God. If you let people fish out of the right side of the boat, pretty soon they're going to be fishing out of the front of the boat and the back of the boat. And why then we're liable to get women on board. And if you get women on board, why, for heaven's sake, then we have to put on our clothes. Well, the right side of that's a slippery slope if ever I've heard one. No, you can't fish out. If you start fishing out of the right side of the boat, why, all of civilization is going to come crashing down. No, we never did it that way before. Now, the gospel writer doesn't record that conversation. I can't help but believe that it happened. And if it didn't happen then, I know that it happens now. Cast your nets out of the right side of the boat? You got to be kidding. Ordain women? And some churches are still struggling with that one. In one of my former churches, the big battle was whether or not to let women become ushers. New hymns? As if all hymns weren't new sometime? praise bands, guitars, video screens, and worship? Heaven forfend. Oh, and here's one. What about sitting in a different pew? Oh, we've never done it that way before. For John Wesley, it was called field preaching. You see, Anglican preachers only preached in the pulpit. It was indecent for a priest to be outside the church, and all preaching was always done in the sanctuary, in the pulpit. But there was a problem with that. George Whitefield noticed that all these coal miners, they were working these long days in the mines, covered with coal dust. They didn't have time to get cleaned up and come to an 11 o'clock service. And so George Whitefield started going out to the coal mines at 5 o'clock in the morning. And lo and behold, people listened to him. He told John Wesley ought to try it. And Wesley recorded in his journal, I considered it vile. But finally, Whitefield convinced him. And Wesley went out and started preaching at the coal mines and on the street corners and even on his father's tombstone. And lo and behold, people responded. And at that point, John Wesley said, I was determined to become more vile in order to communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, they threw their nets over the other side of the boat, and guess what? The gospel writer says they were not able to haul them in because of the quantity of fish. You see, it's just amazing what can happen when we preserve the core and stimulate change. When you hold on to the core mission of the church, but are willing to risk new ways of sharing the gospel. As United Methodists, we know that our core mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Now, how are we going to accomplish that mission? Let me bring it home. I think one of the challenges for a strong, vital congregation, like Church of the Dunes, one of the challenges of a lively, strong, vital congregation is that we really get to feel good about ourselves and feel good about what we're doing. It works, and we like it that way. But every once in a while, the challenge for a church like ours is to ask the question, what about the people we aren't reaching? What do we need to do to reach people that we aren't already reaching? We know how to reach the people we are reaching. But the question is, what do we need to do to cast the nets wider and to reach persons that we're not already reaching? What do we need to do to expand our mission and expand our ministry, to touch the lives of more people? Maybe it's time to think about fishing out of the other side of the boat. Fred Craddock tells a story about a guy named Frank. He met Frank in one of the little churches he served in Washita Creek, Oklahoma. A little town with a population of 450. And there were 4 churches, Methodist, Baptist, Nazarene, and Fred was the pastor at the Christian church. And each of the 4 churches had their fair share of the community, except for old Frank. Everybody knew Frank, and everybody knew that Frank was never going to go to church. Craddock says when he met Frank, he got the standard line that Frank gave everybody. I work hard, take care of my family, mind my own business. As far as I'm concerned, everything else is fluff. That's why everybody was so surprised when Frank showed up requesting baptism. Some people in town thought he must be dying, thought he had a bad diagnosis, maybe a bad heart, trying to set things right. But Craddock says Frank told him why he did it. Frank said, you know, I always said I work hard, take care of my family, mind my own business. I said that all the time. Only thing was, back then, I didn't know what my business was. And now I do. We know what our business is. Let's go fishing.